Hi, everyone. Welcome. Carl Steinbeck here. I want to talk about Charlie Adelson and a few other things. And as you know, he's been relocated from Wakulla Annex south of Tallahassee. He's now at the Columbia Annex, which is in Lake City, Florida. It's almost directly to the east. It's closer to Jacksonville than Tallahassee, but it's not too far off the interstate that connects the two cities. So before I talk some more about that, though, I just want to say that I did disable the chat option, so you can no longer give a super chat or any kind of those chat things, whatever they call them. So I don't want to have to interrupt the question and answer session of this. So I just like to get straight to the best questions that I see are most relevant to what we're talking about on the subject, and also some of the other issues that are not on subject for the opening statements that I have, because some of you are new, very new to this case. The case is really expanding and growing in the following of it around the world from all the other channels that have really popped up and are doing coverage of this case. So I don't have time to see those, but I know that it seems like every few days in the last couple of months, there's always a new channel talking about the Adelson murder case. So the the other thing is this channel is to support the justice for the Markells, not this Dan Markel who was murdered in his garage back in 2014 in the summer. But it also, I'm here to talk about justice for all the Markells, including his surviving sons, who have had pretty much non-existent, I should say, visitation with the Markel side of the family. That's mostly up all in Canada there. So that's been an ongoing issue of serious concern for so many of us followers. So you new followers that are following this case, that's one of the um, really hot button topics that I think is going to be a really strong piece of evidence that the prosecution will use against future Adelson prosecutions. And just like they used it in the Charlie Adelson trial, talking about the denial of visitation and rebutting that from Wendi by having an FBI agent testify, I do believe that the prosecution goes after this even harder with Donna, because she was more directly excuse me, involved in the visitation denials. Then I would say that that helps build a stronger case for them. So I will say that there's also been a lot of activity out there. If you notice, people are trying to discredit key witnesses and key evidence against the state that they have to bring down more of the Adelsons. And how I look at that, it's really a psyops operation. And it looks like some of these folks may be paid by different defense counsel teams. There is strategic communications that goes on with wealthy people when they know they have a case up against them. And we do know that even the friend of Wendi Adelson, if you look at the text message that was sent on Donna's phone when she was arrested, it said something to the fact that, yeah, you're not going to get a fair trial anywhere in Florida. And this is about she's about to board her plane and take off and never to return to the United States again if she could help it. So she was apprehended there, of course, and now she's up there in Leon County Jail in Tallahassee, awaiting her charges for murder, first degree murder, and conspiracy and solicitation. And in that, she has now her son, Charlie Adelson, who's already been convicted of those same charges. He's just down the road a ways now from his mom, and his appeal is pending as well. So I think it's something that we're going to see more of. We're going to see more Adelson's arrests coming down the pike. The prosecution does have this approach where they're just taking one at a time until one Adelson's convicted. They're not doing another prosecution starting until that one's completed. So if you've been following my channel, you see that I'm not happy with that. And I think that's not the best approach to take, but at least they are taking an approach of going after these Adelsons. And we'll see how soon the next Adelson's arrested after Donna's convicted. Hopefully there's an arrest before and maybe two more arrests before Donna gets a trial based on the forensic evidence from the digital evidence seized, meaning things like iPads and smartphones. So with that said, also I want to say that this is not a platform to have defense talking points and spin put on here. So there was one question that somebody shoot me an email, shot me an email tonight saying that, their comment got struck. Well, it got struck because of the defense talking point, and I'm just not here to entertain that. So if it's something I believe that you really are trying to help the defense, you're trying to help muck up the prosecution, then I'm not going to answer that question, and I will strike your question from being entertained. So we are here to discuss the truth about this case, but I'm not going to sit there and let this defense strategy and talking points trying to cause confusion and psyops to the government's case and make them feel like, well, maybe we shouldn't go after more Adelson. So I'm here to basically encourage them to do the right thing and to go after the full justice that the Markells have been denied for so many years. So the prosecution is getting better. They're building huge momentum in this case, and that's great to see. And I wish they realized how good they actually have it. So that remains to be seen. I'm optimistic. And so we have, excuse me, I have something in my throat here tonight. Excuse me. So with this, getting back to this issue now with Charlie being transferred, this came up on short notice. This was not expected. Excuse me. And it just got sprung on us, and as it got sprung on us, it also got sprung on Charlie. So Charlie would not have been aware until they're getting ready to transfer him. That's the way normally prisons work. They don't want inmates telling other people that they're being transferred and where they're being transferred to, because what that does is that'd give them a chance. I'm sorry, I got to get some water. I'll be right back. Stand by. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. Drink my normal green tea with honey, and all of a sudden got some in my throat I couldn't get out. But in any event, all right, so I'm back here. And where was I? So the move there, like I say, was something that Charlie would have not have known, because they don't want inmates telling other folks, and they could possibly have an intercept, and it's just not a secure thing to do to tip off any of the inmates where they're being transferred to. So Charlie would have found out probably after he pulled up to the gates and followed the road signs and stuff like that to figure out where he wound up. So why he actually went there, I'd say probably one possibility is, and I'm not getting this from any direct source, but I think from my experience, one of the issues could be that they wanted to put Charlie there in a location that was very easy to be accommodating, and not the tough, hard prison life that most of us were thinking that Charlie was going to be facing. So he had it very good there compared to normal prison life in Florida, where they have overcrowding issues, a lot of violence issues. And so he went from probably the best facility to not face those kind of dangers to one of the worst facilities. In fact, I saw an article that talked about this facility he's at now, the Columbia facility. He's at the Annex, so not sure if the Annex would even be grouped in with the Columbia facility as a whole, but it's considered one of the most dangerous places to be in Florida. And it's not well received by the inmates. There's a lot of conditions there that the inmates complain about over the years. And as I understand it, there's basically about one murder there the last 20 years. Every year there's a murder there. I saw one inmate had his eye gouged out, ripped out of his skull by another inmate. And so, and I think that was the one that happened in protective custody. So even if you're in protective custody like Charlie would be, that's not a guarantee or an assurance that you're in a safe place. And they do the best they can, but they're understaffed, and there can be hits put out on folks and whatnot. So Charlie's entering a whole different arena now. And from what I've heard from chatter from different folks, they're hearing that Charlie is not happy about it. He felt like he was doing pretty good there in Wakulla. So now he's at this new facility, and it's a whole different type of environment now, where he's seeing the kind of threats, and he's in a facility that he's got to watch his back, and he's got to sleep with one eye open if he can, because he never knows what could happen there. to threaten his life or welfare. So this is something that could just be temporary as well. He could be moved again. There could be new threats that developed. Apparently, there were no threats against Charlie that at least he supposedly is telling folks, but there could be threats against him that he just doesn't know about. So that could be a reason why they moved him. It could be also that the convicted cops that were there working, in the same cell with him, they could have been tired of listening to Charlie as well. And they could have been talking about to the guards, hey, look, we can't take this guy. You got to get him out of here. And so Charlie may have thought he got along fine, but I think that the other inmates would have begged to differ. So I think that's maybe what was going on there. I doubt it had something to do with Latin Kings putting a threat on him or anything like that. So it could be a way of inducement, showing him the good type of conditions he has if he cooperates versus the bad conditions he faces now. Because if Charlie's thinking about flipping on another family member, being in a place where he has a lot to dread every day when he wakes up, if he even gets a good night's sleep, is something to really make him think about. Gee, I could be back in Wakulla. Maybe if I could go ahead and become state's evidence, then I could actually have some kind of greater protection that they would provide for me. So I don't know if that was like the psychological, strategic type of decision that was made by Department of Corrections. Perhaps it could have just been the state attorney's office asked the Department of Corrections to keep him closer to Tallahassee so that in the event he flipped, he could get easy access to counsel. And so we just don't know for sure. We're probably not going to hear anything from being leaked from the state. We're probably only going to hear stuff leaked from Charlie's side of the house. So, and it's not going to be necessarily credible from Charlie's perspective. So that's all I can really tell you right now. But I think that I think it's the issue that he's in a different place now is going to definitely be playing the back of his mind on is there anything he can do to improve his conditions, and if he's there the rest of his life, then I think that's gonna really make him think hard and fast about, gee, is it worth trying to cut a deal or doing something to better my life condition to get a chance to see my son, and without having a successful case on appeal, this is the kind of life he's going to have for the rest of his life. And so I think that I think this is a good thing to make him reflect on what he's done and reflect on what he wants to do to make a difference to perhaps improve things for the state by improving things for himself and having a chance perhaps by cooperating with the state and maybe having a chance to see his son outside the prison system. So that remains to be seen. I think right now it's way too early for him to decide he wants to flip it all. I think that's going to have to be after his mom passes away, assuming he outlives her. So more to follow on that. I think there's going to be a lot of twists and turns. I heard a lot of people saying, well, between now and September, there's really nothing to cover. But I think there's always going to be a lot of twists and turns on this case. I think there's going to be a lot of issues that arise that there will be plenty to talk about. So stay tuned. And I also moved the time back tonight on a Friday night. I thought that it would be good to move it as late as I could have it because I thought because of all the support we're getting from Australia, as I mentioned on an earlier podcast, we have the second and fourth highest viewing cities are there in Australia, Sydney and Melbourne. And rounding up the top 15 at number 15 is also Brisbane. I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, but in any event, with all the support we get there from Australia, I thought if I do it, the later I can go at night. This is on a Saturday afternoon already there in Australia. So if you Australians have any questions for tonight, because you usually miss my live streams because you're working during the week. Because if I do a Sunday night, it's already Monday, Monday during the day when you're probably at work. So that's why I'm doing this later format on a Friday night here. So yeah, Perth. I saw Perth is mentioned also. They're further down the list, like maybe 20th or something like that. So yeah, if you are from Australia, go ahead and tell us what city you're from here in the chat. So with that, that's all I have for my opening statement. So I wanted to have a shorter opening statement. I will talk Sunday night. I will be back Sunday night, normal time, 7 o'clock Central here in the United States to talk about this issue about the appeal that was filed on Katie McManus's behalf. So that won't take a whole lot of time, so we can get into questions as well. And so I want to have more time this weekend to cover Q&As. I'm not able to get to all the questions that you guys are emailing me. I apologize for that. And I'm trying to do the best I can to get to questions also on the channel after the live stream shut down or the days following that. But I'm not able to get to all those as much as I'd like. So I figured it'd be easier just to jump on and do a live stream. So excuse me, if you do have a question, go ahead. If you can put an emoji, I guess is how you do the red question mark. Those are the easiest to see me for me to see. So with that, I'll go ahead and start looking for questions here. The Skeeter girl there in Texas is saying, I think this transfer is the Florida DOC's version of the thumb screws to get Charlie to give up Wendi. I think there's a possibility of that. I think that's what a lot of people are thinking is going on, but we don't know for sure. And I think a lot of state Department of Corrections, they're not going to think in those lines of how can we do things to make things difficult for somebody to flip and become state's evidence. I don't think most Department of Corrections really do that. So I think it'd be more like something along the lines of the state attorney's office or the Bureau of Criminal Investigation for the states asking somebody to be closer to the courthouse or something like that. But we won't know for sure for maybe a while, and that's not something you're normally going to find publicly releasable on why somebody got transferred. So, and like I say, you can be transferred multiple times over the years in different states. So it may not be the first time in the next year that Charlie's transferred. All right, tennis girl is asking, do you think Sigfredo being transferred to a different prison may signify cooperation from him? It's quite a coincidence he moved around the same time as Charlie. I think that I'm hearing about him having the interest in maybe cooperating. I don't know if that's truthful at all. I have not been listening to any other channels, so I don't know if that's actually an issue out there. So if you guys know something about that, where you're getting this, that he may want to cooperate. Like I said, being transferred between prisons is a normal thing, and so I don't think that's out of the norm. And if he was moving closer, like maybe to Wakulla or something, maybe he does want to cooperate, and they want to move him to Wakulla, which is right south of Tallahassee, 15 minutes from the courthouse. So maybe they wanted to move him there so he could help cooperate the prosecution. That's why they had to bump Charlie out of there. I mean, that could be a possibility as well. So there's a number of things at play. We just don't know for sure. But I think right now it's looking better for whatever reason it is. I think it's good for the justice for the Markells. Okay, Robin Graves Altum is asking, is the case against Wendi at least as strong as the case was against Michelle Troconis? Surely it must be. I don't know much at all about that Troconis case, so I can't compare the two. But if she got convicted, I would say she's got a strong case as well against her. So I just think the prosecution needs to dial up and go ahead and go for it. All right, so we have here Jamie Jess is saying, I heard from a very reliable source that a CO in Wakulla said that she was jogging on Trescott the day of the murder to another CO, and they booted Charlie because of it. I mean, that could be something as well. I just don't know. And I don't know who your reliable source is, but obviously the reliable source doesn't want to put their name out there if they have inside connections. So that is a possibility. Yeah, my throat is better now. I should have had water. I grabbed tea instead of water, so that was my mistake. LJ the kitten is right here. She's doing better. She has one more antibiotic to get tomorrow morning, and then she's done with her series. So she's feeling better, aren't you, little LJ? Okay, sorry about that. I think LJ hit the machine here for the mic. So thanks for alerting me to that. So the question here has to do with, is there a higher percentage of convictions in the military court than in criminal court, say for the same types of crimes? If yes, if you're concerned, you're too sure of attaining convictions. So I guess you're concerned that maybe I'm used to a different system in the military than in civilian court. But what I can tell you is I have experience in both systems. I've started out interning with a federal judge. I saw jury trials there. That was in Dallas, Texas. I also interned with a federal magistrate and actually was a paid part-time clerk while I was in law school. That was up in Des Moines, Iowa. And I took part in court uh, proceedings there. I also have been a student prosecutor while I was in law school as well, and I have prosecution experience there. Granted, it wasn't doing felony cases. I've also done felony cases in the military. I've also done them in state court, not as a long-term prosecutor, but I have done prosecutions many different assignments in the military, and we have the same rules of evidence, the same kind of standards of what the burden of proof is and whatnot. You have different type of makeup of the juries. The juries are handpicked by the commanding general, the base usually, and you don't need 12 jurors. You don't need unanimous vote to convict. So in that sense, it is easier to convict than in a civilian setting. But I can tell you that the same type of method of prosecuting the case works in all settings, and so I've also done a lot of defense work in the civilian setting as well. And I'd say probably half my trials that I've done in the military, I've done almost 50 civilian trials. And so those kind of things, same kind of thing as well. The how a jury views evidence is pretty much what I find universal, no matter what court I go in, what state I go into. I've tried cases all over the different military bases I've been assigned to, including over in Germany and over the Middle East. So I would say that no, if you're concerned about me being overly optimistic, no, I'm not. If you look at my track record of what I've predicted about this case, I think that will tell you that I'm being dead on accurate from my experience. And so therefore, as far as the actual what percentage of convictions, I don't track convictions at all, and on what percentages of one versus the other. I would say that you're more likely to get prosecuted for violent crimes in the military than you are in state court. If it's a weaker case in the military, they're more likely to take it than they will in civilian court. Things are very politicized in military court martials, and it's been that way, increasingly so every year that I served, almost over 30 years. So I think that's never going to lighten up and get less political. So I think you see that in lot of a lot of cases, though, that violence is trying to be rooted out in society, and so we need strong prosecutors to go after it. And that's why I wanted to get on this case, is because I didn't think that there was proper attention being given to the Markells and to the surviving boys of the Markells, being able to see the family up in Canada. And so, with that being done, um, to the boys, where they pretty much had the family tree cut off for most intents and purposes, I thought that was something that there needed to be there need to be folks on podcasts talking about the injustice done to them as well, not just the adult Markell families that have suffered through the loss of Dan Markell. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say on that. Hopefully that I've addressed your question. LR is asking, is it public access to know who visits prisoners, or does anyone know if Wendi can visit him or anyone? Well, I can tell you, if Florida does have a visitor log, that is something that they'd be the one state over others that would have that access given. So I think we might be able to see that from Florida. I don't know for sure. I do know we got that from jail records, and channels like True Lifestyles have published those kind of things. So more to follow on that. Karen's okay from you're from also Australia. That's great. Thanks, Feisty. So let's see. Robin McBruin, that's funny. So the move is a special edition bump. Yeah, so I bump my normal time slot and day, but I do tend to come back Sunday as well. Kale Las Vegas is asking, is it stand for a life in prison to be moved away many times until they depart this world? I kind of thought they'd go to one prison and that's where they'd reside forever. Just curious. I think, like I say, it's all depends on what state you're going to. And a lot of states don't have a lot of prisons. And so I think Florida, they have a lot of gangs and whatnot there. I think the bigger population states where they have many more prisons, I think there's much more issues of security that they try to stay ahead of with gang activity, especially. Think about it, you got Aryan nations and Latin kings and a lot of gang members, and they can get very violent among themselves. And I think that's the kind of stuff that Charlie's probably going to be seeing there. Although in the protective custody, you're not going to see as many of those, but they have ways of doing stuff, and so you're never totally safe in a situation like that. All right, so Patricia S is asking, is the issue of Katie's defense being paid by the Adelsons over? Prosecution accused them of paying. They had every reason to keep Katie from taking a plea and talking. Can that ever be revealed? I don't know if we're ever going to learn about that. Katie wasn't asked about that at trial, so I think that'll come out somewhere down the road, but it may be some years. Farrell Gamma is asking, do you have any opinions? Lack of evidence presented during the Michelle Trachonius trial and the guilty verdict rendered on count one, conspiracy to commit murder charges. I'm not following that case, so I don't know about the lack of evidence. I guess in your opinion there was a lack of evidence, but I didn't watch it, so I cannot tell you whether that was what something I thought was a appropriate verdict. All right, somebody else from Perth. Dina is asking what would Wendy be charged with? The same thing that Charlie is. In addition to, I would believe perjury. I think they would charge her with perjury 3 times. I would expect them to for the 3 times she's testified. And that way that'd be a way to get in her statements to show how much she's changed her statement over times and was being evasive and just making a lot of bizarre answers to the questions. Vicky Ireland is asking, do you have any hope that Charlie will turn on Wendy to get a shorter sentence? If he does turn on her, the thing is he's not gonna be able to cut a deal I don't think for a number of years. I think it's gonna be, like, up to the state to recommend a lessening of his sentence, and so it may not shave a whole lot off. It might just give him make him be eligible for parole, something like that, so okay. Brisbane, okay, that's the way you say it. Sorry, I was butchering the pronunciation there. I've never been to Australia. My brother John's been there a lot. He's following us now. He says it's a great place. I talked to someone else as well. In fact, I think it was one of the mods here, Roxanne. I think she said it was like the best food she ever had. And I also worked for a 3-star general that had a legal conference there. And he said that place was amazing. He thought it was one of the best places he ever visited in the entire world. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, Patty's Playhouse. Thank you, Patty. Your son I know worked at Wakulla, so you're saying that there's only 2 protective management locations, so those are the 2 he's got to go to, so maybe he won't travel around anymore after that. Yeah, I'm not the one that got him transferred, I'm sure about that. So I have not looked up. I guess if somebody wants to look up while we're chatting, if Sigfredo got moved, I've not seen that. But if somebody can verify that by going to the prisoner inmate lookup for Florida. David Riggs is asking, "Do you truly believe Wendy will be arrested?" Yes, I mean, I would say that the evidence is there, and it's something that the state needs to do. The state has basically called her an unindicted co-conspirator, and there's plenty of reasons why that she would be convicted. So I don't know why they wait for that. So it's just a matter of time, but that day will come. I'm very, very absolutely confident. Shout out to Iowa girls basketball. That's my alma mater for undergrad. Yeah. B. Rabbit's asking, as the state attorney's advised prior to a prisoner being moved, do they have a say on if, when, where, and if a prisoner is moved? I don't think they really get involved in that. I've never seen that to be the case. So I think it's doubtful. I think they could get involved, and if they ask somebody to be moved, like they also, for example, somebody needs to be available to testify, then they would file the appropriate paperwork to get them transferred to be available to testify during a certain block of time and date. Okay, so Tracy H is asking, do we know if Charlie's had any visitors yet? I do believe that Harvey has visited him a few weeks ago, but that's it. I believe Harvey would have taken a flight up there to Tallahassee from Miami, and but he cannot visit Donna. Keep in mind he cannot visit Donna. So, but I think in the prison kind of system, I doubt that they have like recordings like we have on the phone calls. So that's the one downside of that. We can't hear what they're talking about. I already talked about what Wendy will be charged with. Yeah, Pamela Southey's asking about there was a new warrant for electronics for the phones and iPads due to new technology, so they'll have the ability to turn them back to the police. Well, they still have been with the police. I think they're just asking for the ability to be able to do an additional test beyond the window. I think the judge authorized them. I think that's what I had heard was the case. Chantal is asking, do you think Wendy has enough rich friends to get a dream team, OJ style, to get off, or is the case strong enough to get a conviction? Yeah, the case is strong enough to get a conviction, absolutely. And I would say that doesn't matter what kind of lawyer you get. I think that the evidence is such that it's sort of like death by a thousand cuts. There's so many different ways you could show indications of involvement that there's no way you could say that's just an innocent happenstance. All right, I'm still at 10 questions on 1024. Now I'm seeing there's no sound. Okay, can't hear. Sorry about that. That's why I wasn't seeing you guys' questions. So I'm behind, so let me try to catch up. All right, so let me see here. So questions about no sound or comments. Well, the last 5 minutes you didn't hear me when that happened. Sorry. All right, let me jump ahead. Yeah, so switching prisoners around for Charlie. I think that it sounds like from what Patty's saying, it's only going to be the Wakulla or else this other one in Columbia. Eric Lieber is asking, how many murders have you prosecuted? I have had a, let's see, I've had an attempted murder case as a prosecutor. I've had a lot of violent crime type cases as a prosecutor. None other than that as a murder case. But I've had several as a defense counsel. And attempted murder, I've had a number of attempted murders and ag assaults and stuff like that. I had a lot of those, and we have a lot of those on big military bases like in Texas. Patricia S. is asking, do you think the prosecution will wrap it up in 2 years? I sure hope so. My gosh, this has gone on way too long. And I think that's part of the frustration so many people have is what's taken so long? Why is this case so difficult for the prosecution to get off the ground? And you saw how overwhelming it was, the evidence against Charlie. I mean, the fact that that took 9 years to get to trial is just a really, really shocker. All right, so let's see. We got all right, Nora Vine is saying in Australia it can take 30 plus years for a prime suspect with a mountain of evidence against them to be actually arrested. Yeah, I don't know about Australia's system at all. So apparently you're from there. Hopefully that's not the case, but wow, that I know in countries like in Europe, you can get off with like a 8-year sentence for premeditated murder in some of those countries over there. I think that's really shocking. All right, I've seen some repeat questions here. I don't know what happened. Janie's asking if Rob Adelson will be a witness, or if not, do you think he'll come to Donna's trial? I don't think he's going to go to trial. They're not even in contact, and I think as I understand, it, he dropped off contact with all the rest of his family members when they started acting so strange after the murder of Dan Markel that he was convinced that they were involved in, and that's why he cut off contact. So I think his testimony as to what happened and how they reacted to this, I think is very key insider knowledge that I think would be very riveting and very compelling for a jury to see. And that really right there, your own son, an honorable doctor in New York, won't have anything to do with you because of the way you cut off discussions with Dan Markel and the way you talked about it and acted. And yeah, I think it's going to be very telling. And I think they will. I really think they would be smart to do that. I'd be shocked if they don't. Oh, Perth, Scotland. Okay. Okay. So no mud, no Lotus is saying you're a law clerk, been working a law firm here in Australia for 10 years. Can assure you that never happens. Okay, I think you're talking about the 30 years to get somebody prosecuted. Penalties for perjury, in Florida, if I remember correctly, I think it depends on what type of case it is. And like if it's a murder case and you commit perjury there, then I think that's like 15 years, 15 or 20 years, possibly 30, maybe 15 to 30 now. I'm thinking it's been a while since I looked at that. Joe is asking, who do I think will be arrested next, Wendy or Harvey? Well, hopefully it's both of them at the same time. That would be the ideal setup. They need to get these prosecutions wrapped up. Yeah, Denise Risha is saying when Luis Rivera testified, Georgia asked him if he knew Dan's schedule from a blog, and he said yes. And she said, "What blog?" And Luis said, "Wendy." He didn't know what a blog meant, but he said Wendy. Yeah. So that was interesting. Yeah, it was so obvious he's not checking the prof's blog to see what his schedule is. I mean, that's so ridiculous. But it just goes to show that he got it. He got it from the Adelsons, and Wendy's the one that knew his schedule exactly. So yeah, I think that's a good data point against Wendi. Audrey Jordan is asking, what do you think Wendi is telling the boys about Uncle Charlie and Grandma, where they went? You can't believe that they don't know about the current events. Yeah, that's really they're probably just telling them that they got, the system up in Tallahassee's corrupt and they falsely accuse people and they're just trying to pin the blame on the the Adelsons down in Florida because they just don't like them and stuff like that. I think is what the way that normally happens. Lovely Spinks is saying you have a great interest in learning about the law or the other options of learning besides law school. Well, I think law school to me was very disappointing. I thought I'd learn a lot more about the law, and I thought I'd learn a lot more about how to practice being a lawyer. And it's really the way law is taught here in the United States, most of it's like the Socratic method. You just read cases and how the judge decides them, but they don't really teach you how to be a lawyer per se. So if you don't want to be a practicing lawyer, I would say just look for other books that talk about what it's like to practice in a certain area of law that you like, or you can look at stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of YouTube channels that talk about what it's like being a lawyer in a particular area. So between books and YouTube, you could probably learn about a lot about the law. Sorry folks, LJ had hit that. There's a real sensitive button on the here's a little LJ. And like I say, she was the one that was sick. She's feeling a little bit better now. Has been running around. So sorry, LG. I'll have to move you away from there. She likes laying on these cords. I got tons of cords here, and she likes laying on the cords. So sorry, that's fixed now. Yeah, Albert. I also hope the Markells will experience peace and love from the grandson soon. Yeah, I think you asked us before, Chantel. Would Wendy with her rich friends, boyfriends be able to get off the dream team of lawyers, OJ style, or is the case against Trump? Yeah, when you know you got a good case, I don't worry about who the defense lawyers are. I don't care what kind of stunts they try to pull. If the truth is on your side, you go after the truth, and they'll try to spin it and cause confusion and try to intimidate witnesses and do all these different stunts. And if you know what kind of tricks you pull because you got the experience of countering them, then you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And so I want a defendant to have an aggressive defense team. I'm not afraid to have them have their day in court and do what they can to try to counter what I'm prosecuting. And I can tell you that the it is a sad thing to see if you have a defense lawyer that basically loses a case for the defendant, or it's otherwise probably a case they wouldn't have gotten convicted on, but for a bad lawyer. So it can be something that is easy to be convicted on in America if you have what I've said. If you have a lying witness, a bad judge, a bad prosecutor, or a bad defense counsel, or any combination, or even a bad jury or juror, any combination of those, or an individual factor of one of those, and you could be convicted in America. So I would say it's not like it happens all the time, but it can happen, and there is a vast degree of capability and skill sets in different attorneys, excuse me, defense attorneys, and even prosecutors. And so you could have a very strong case, and if your prosecutor doesn't really know what they're doing, then you can wind up having the case be lost for that reason. Or if you have a defense attorney that is better than the prosecutor, you could win, the state could lose just because of that, even though they actually had better evidence. They just didn't know how to packaged it the right way to the jury. And maybe they didn't know about jury selection well enough. Maybe they left some folks on the jury they should have kicked off. So there's all these different dynamics that play in a trial. And I would say if you're if you're a defendant, you need to make sure your attorney knows how to address all these different aspects of a trial. Because if they don't, yeah, you could wind up being convicted. Michelle's asking, can the Markells visit the grandkids now? I don't know about the visitation of them. I know it's been very limited. And at one point, it was a 6-year gap where they weren't allowed, and only right before trials was Wendy allowing them to visit. So I think that's such critical information to bring up in trial that I'd be shocked if they don't bring in Phil and Ruth Markell to talk about the hell they've had to endure trying to get to know their grandsons. So it's bad enough they have their son murdered, but then his surviving children that they're pretty much kept away from them, and they've never had time alone with the boys. To my knowledge, they've never had the day just to go take off with grandma or grandpa, or it's always helicopter parenting by one of the Adelsons to make sure the boys don't leak any information. So it's really like a Stockholm syndrome, sort of like a cult type of thing. So Harvey cannot visit Donna because that's part of the prison rules. He can talk to her over the phone, but he cannot visit her. Cessna 101 is asking if Charlie turned evidence on Wendy, what would that be, admitting his role in the crime? Yeah, it would be. Surely it would. And if he, like, say, if his appeals are exhausted, he's never going to get out. Then maybe he would just say, you know what, it bothers me so much. My sister got away with this. I'm willing to just go ahead and tell him everything I know. All right, I'm about 12 minutes behind here. I'm going to try to catch up to your questions. Keel Las Vegas is asking about how Wendy dressed the day of the hit. She met friends for lunch at a nice restaurant, had a t-shirt on, no makeup, and baggy shorts. Yeah, some other ladies have talked about that as well on the channel. And yeah, I call them gardener clothes. So I do think that's very, very odd. Pamela, if you want to be a mod, go ahead and shoot me an email or text message. You can see that up above on the channel. Beverly Laura says her in 75, her brother was found not guilty of attempted murder and it was self-defense. Okay, well, hopefully that was justice served. I'm sure you felt glad your brother got acquitted of that. Carrie McDivitt, you're asking why it took 9 years. Please answer if you can. Please just go back to any of my last podcasts. There's a lot of them that talk about the delays and how politics was like the largest reason why. I'll just say politics, and you can look at one of my last two podcasts would talk about that, or both of them would. So that's probably the best start for you there. Dinah's asking why does Charlie get to be in protective custody specifically? Well, because I think him having the um, the aspect of being Jewish and there's Aryan nations there, and he's also comes from wealthy family, so the extortion racket is very prevalent in prison prisons, I should say, across America, and so he'd easily be a target. He has a big target on his back for a number of reasons. Plus, he's convicted of murder, and so he has he's around some really violent folks as well, and so those kind of things are or why they're looking to protect him, because they see with other folks that are convicted of murder, then Charlie wouldn't last very long. So they're trying to give him some safety as much as they can, but it's never going to be, I think, something for Charlie to feel like he's totally safe and secure in any facility. Okay, Catalina is saying Sigfredo Garcia's current facility is in Santa Rosa, according to the inmate database. So thank you for that. I'm not planning to come in Australia anytime soon, but that's one long flight. I don't like those super long flights. All right, so we see here, Demi's asking, could the decision to bring Adelson's to trial one by one be driven by budget of state attorney's office? Only so much money. No, because they're trying out a lot of other cases too. I don't see that being the case. It's actually going to be more expensive to do them one at a time over the long haul. It's going to be more expensive because you got to keep having the same witnesses be brought up from Miami, and that's going to take more money, more hotel lodging and whatnot. They got to pay for mileage and all that. So if they're a state witness, that's not going to cost as much money. Jurors don't cost as much, but there are some costs involved, obviously. So yeah, I don't see that being an issue. Robin is asking, could they subpoena payment records from Katie's attorney to find out who's paying for a defense appeal? I I don't think they're going to do that right now. I think that'd be too much attorney-client privilege, unless Katie would want to indicate that in her testimony. But I don't think they've been asking that of her, so I don't know what she would have to say about that. I don't know what type of telescope that is. Sorry. Sunshine Girl, do you think Wendy's watching this? I think somebody from the defense team is watching all of these and they're reporting back. Whether the actual Adelsons look at them or not, I do not know. Becky Ireland, you're asking if I do 2 or 3 shows a week, and I don't know that I have the time to do 2 shows even consistently a week, but I'm looking at this other case, the Bradigan case down the road in Jacksonville, Florida. So I'm going to start covering more of that as time goes on. And maybe another case, I'm looking at maybe doing the Crystal Rogers case up in Kentucky. I think that's a really bizarre, extremely strange case. Multiple murders, people being killed because they could become too close to the suspects. So yeah, I think that's very, very much an interesting case. Have you ever seen a case that took this long when there's so much evidence? No, I have not. That's why I was so shocked when I first found out about this case. And also hearing about what the boys had suffered through. Stardust Like is saying on SDS, you say that you felt Rashbaum's body language towards Charlie, the chair turned away, but you're interrupted. What do you think body's language said? Well, he was, and I was sitting directly behind the prosecutors during the closings of both. But like when Georgia was doing her closing, the Rashbaum sort of had his back and his shoulders, sort of shoulder like this, deflecting away from Charlie. And I just never seen defense counsel do that. You want your client to look like you get along good, like he's a likable person. And I thought that by turning your shoulder, like stay away from me. I'm trying to distance myself from me. And he also was like moved his chair sort of towards the edge of the table, and it just looked like like the physical separation and the body language indicating like there was some kind of a dispute between them, and having that going on in a closing statement, I just thought was very odd because juries do pick up on body language and stuff like that. I think most of the jurors were so captivated by George's closing and all the stuff they're presenting on the slides, they may not have noticed that. But a normal trial where you don't have as much video graphic production, I would say that's going to strike out more as something in the minds of the jurors, like, wow, it's something's going on between them. Even the lawyer doesn't seem to want to have to deal with Charlie. And likability of the defendant can make a difference. I've said that before, and I saw somebody made a comment after one of my podcasts saying, "Oh, so you're basically saying that if somebody's not likable, they're going to convict them." And it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if they have a case, there's have some evidence of guilt, and maybe if it's not normally enough that they'd want to convict somebody on, if subjectively you think the guy is like not likable and he comes across as if he's guilty, stuff like that can carry the day for the prosecution. And so how you act in court, how you conduct yourself, if you act smug, arrogant, cocky, and dismissive of the prosecutor, dismissive of the jurors, that kind of stuff can come back to bite you. So that's just human nature. So, and that's why Charlie, despite his evidence, he could have acted impeccable. He could have acted totally respectful of everyone in the courtroom. He could have acted very, very much not like he's trying to be in control and own the room. And he still would have been convicted because the evidence was so strong. But I think his behavior just helped seal the deal that this is the real Charlie, the one who's going to take charge. Katie would never be able to buffalo him or threaten him. And it's made for an absolute slam dunk win of a case. I guess you turn the question red by making an emoji. How you do that, I'm not sure. Macaulay's asking about you're confused with Wendy's immunity and how the prosecution gets around what she has already testified. I don't know what you mean by getting around. I mean, if she's subpoenaed, she has to answer the questions. And every time she testifies, it's like she just gets worse and worse as a witness. And there's more and more things that she says that prosecution could charge her with perjury. And so whether they do or not, I don't know, but I sure hope they do. Yeah, I feel bad for Robert too. Kelvin, I went to University of Iowa for undergrad and then Drake Law School. Yeah, my crazy nan says that I'd be disgusted with her sentence in Australia. Life here is 30 years less with parole. Yeah, I don't know why most the Western world, they've really light on sentences, so for Europe and a lot of the colonial old colonial countries of Britain, I think they're the same way. Yeah, I think America is the only one that's tougher on crimes. I think Canada's that way too. Like murder, you're not going to get more than 10 to 30 years, even if it's premeditated. All right, so let's see here. Now, Charlie was actually moved further away. Sharon, I think you're from Israel, so nice to see you here supporting the cause. No, he's further away from his attorney. Do you believe everything Luis said? Do you believe believe him that the Latin Kings were not involved? Yeah, I don't think Latin Kings were involved. I think because he has his longstanding childhood friendship with Sigfredo, I think that's why he was willing to help him out. Sigfredo was the one that came to him and asked him to help out. So I think that's how that went down. Haymon is asking about a statute of limitation on perjury. In Florida, it has to do with what kind of a case you committed perjury on. On a murder case, I think the statute of limitation bounces all the way out to 15 years. So they still got some time, but my gosh, if they take that long. So it's 15 years, not from the time of the murder, but from the time that the purge event happened in court. Writing Shotgun is asking if I've heard the saying, cats are the pets of artists and intellectuals. No, I've not heard that. Never heard that at all. That's interesting. Karen McDivitt's asking if any of the jurors are talking yet from Charlie's trial. If they do, they're probably only going to talk to the prosecution, not going to talk to anybody else after the way Charlie and his other folks on the line were slamming the jurors at Tallahassee. Mia Giordano saying, I feel so sorry. Terrible thinking about how awkward it must be for the boys. They've been conditioned by that the Markells are the reason that the families been ripped apart. Yeah, they probably blame them as well, not just the folks at Tallahassee. Yeah, that's true. Lila's asking if I think there'll be any surprise in Donna's defense, or I think it'll be exactly the same unbelievable story. I'm not going to get into that because I don't want to help the defense at all, but they're not going to be able to come up with any kind of story that's going to be making any kind of sense. Pamela Southsea saying they could have went after Charlie because Harvey purchased Charlie's house during a short sale for Charlie and saved Charlie over 400,000. He did it through a local, and then Dad sold it back. Yeah, and they didn't do all the paperwork correctly, from what I understand from Patty. Patty's the one that covered that. So I've not looked at the paperwork, but that's something that Patty does as a part of her job. So I would say that's something that's accurate. Linda Mon is asking, do states ever call out-of-state lawyers to help prosecute? I don't know if they help prosecute in court, but I know there's cold cases. There's a channel, former Houston felony prosecutor had her own show where they talk about cold cases and should drive around different states and look at the evidence and then advise them on how to solve the crime. It was a pretty good show. I forget what they called it, Cold Justice or something like that. I forget her name, but it was good show to watch. And they always brought in some new information, a new wrinkle, and it seemed like they always helped solve the murder. That's what really made it interesting. All right, so here we got Bryce is asking about the Holocaust ring. If the Markells filed civil suit against Wendi for the Holocaust ring back, that would bring such public shame on her and put the nail in the coffin. Well, first of all, it's a dispute that was between Wendi and her husband, and then ex-husband Dan at the time, and so I think I think trying to go after her as the executors of the estate, I just don't see they're not going to get the ring back. She's going to claim something that, she's not going to admit that she has it even. So I just think you're wasting attorney's fees for that if you're not going to have any chance of getting it back. It'd be too upsetting. But yeah, I mean, if a jury hears that, that's going to be another dagger against Wendi. Thanks, Maya. Yeah, John Wesley Holmes asking what kind of cards does Charlie have to play? He doesn't have a whole lot. He could try to flip for the state. And what the state could do is, depending on how credible he is and how much it helps him get a conviction, they could maybe make a pitch to the judge saying he did some post-trial cooperation, and based on that, we think his sentence should be reduced. But keep in mind, it's mandatory minimum life without parole. So, maybe the best he could get is go from without parole to being parole eligible. Not sure how that works in Florida, but doing it after you're convicted and after have lied in court, like Katie did, I think it's very rare, and that's something prosecutors don't really want to have to undo, like they did for like Katie. Like Katie's now trying to help herself, but I think that she's she may not get any kind of sentence reduction, and it remains to be seen. We just don't know, and they're not going to make any kind of reduction until she's done being used as a witness for the prosecution in all the remaining cases, however many that is. All right, so let's see. Yes, I still have a law office in Texas, so I'm an active Texas attorney. I'm licensed in a couple other states as well. I'm inactive there. I'm not actively using my license in those other 3 states. Okay. You hear me on the long flight excuse, Wesley? Okay, that's funny. Yeah, LJ has got Leo as her father, so Leo is like a Bengal type cat. Some people called it classic Tabby, but he's got the personality of a Bengal. He's like a he's like an active kitten still. I don't know how old he is. Suzanne Rupp also thinks that should keep the pressure on the ongoing injustice until Wendy's behind bars. Justice not done. So thank you for supporting the cause, Suzanne. I appreciate that. Another Australian there. Michelle's asking why Charlie is bald now. They shave the inmate's head when they first arrive. Yes, Kelvin. To your question, let's see here. Yeah, look up Crystal Rogers' case on YouTube, you guys, if you want to get a read ahead. CGS is saying the Crystal Rogers case is a good one to cover. So I'm going to start looking at that one as well, but I got to get first up to speed more on the Bridigan case because that one so much closely follows sort of what happened here. All right, looking for some more red marks here, question marks. Chantel's asking, what do you think about the theory that Wendy drove by the crime scene because the plan was her to be the first on the scene? Yeah, I mean, that the thing that makes that somewhat really striking to me is that the way she was dressed. She's dressed like a gardener, or was she dressed like to be the first one to, hold Dan and try to act like she's crying over him because she found him gunned down? I don't know, but it does make you think, right? Somebody also proposed that, well, maybe if she wasn't the one to report it and first on the scene, she would have just driven by and made sure the garage door was closed. So don't know the answer to that. But it is strange. No matter how you slice and dice it, it's extremely strange, bizarre, and it's 1 in a million shot that she'd be driving by there at that time. Olive Music is asking, who was the lady that Luis wanted to rob instead of killing Dan? Donna or Wendy? He was talking about Wendy. He said they did this for Wendy, so that's why he was saying, why don't you just rob her instead of being paid to commit a murder, why don't we just rob her if she's got all that money? Yeah, I'm not tracking the Delphi case. Lovely Spinks is saying the Crystal Rogers one would be a good one, but that's too many cases for me to handle right now. Although those kind of cases, because it's not Florida, you're not going to be able to find the evidence probably to go over as much detail. That's the one downside if I go to cases outside of Florida. Somebody else from Melbourne. Yeah, clueless beekeeping. I've said before. I hope it's both of them. I hope we don't have to do this one at a time. Still, again, it's just really painful to watch. Patricia Burns is asking, why would Donna continue to use a losing attorney? Would you advise her to change, and would she go for a triple extortion defense? Yeah, I'm not gonna. I just think it's very odd. I'm not gonna advise her on what to do, and that's up to them. But if they want to use somebody that had the theory before, just basically get laughed out of the courtroom. Keep in mind, John and I were just talking about this the other day, how the courtroom got cleared out when Charlie was testifying. He started out in the morning, and by the time lunchtime rolled around, people were so insulted they wound up leaving in droves. Most of the courtroom was empty, and it was just so telling of how bad of a job he did testifying. Karen, I do think that Wendy will testify in Donna's trial. They're just gonna do the same motif again, call almost all the same witnesses for Donna's trial. Hive mind concussion saying Donna's dumped two sons now. Rashomon her perfect replacement. Yeah, I mean, he said he sort of considers her like a mom, another mom. So yeah, she can't talk to Charlie, and she lost Rob. So yeah, how sad is how this all shaked out. No relation to John Steinbeck other than my brother. My undergrad major was I have a BBA in finance with emphasis in accounting. So nothing law related. Although I took a couple law courses. A. Miller's asking what I think of Charlie's attitude during jury selection. He was acting if he was one of the attorneys who was not behaving like the defendant at all. Yeah, I mean his whole behavior the entire time was just me as an attorney. If that was my client, I mean it was so cringeworthy. I was just like, okay, I'm glad he's acting his normal self. That's good to see. But as a defendant in a murder trial, there was no way I'd want to see my client acting the way he carried on. And his testimony was just absolutely insulting, like I've said. All right, here MM is asking, why has Donna been so quiet lately? Has she been taking Xanax? I don't know if they give Xanax. I think they might, because it sure looked like Charlie was in different things during the course of his days in court. So it might be the case. Not sure. Yeah, Harley D. Yeah, you're from I think you're from Mississippi. You said your dad's a federal judge and you went to law school as well, in the military as well. I think, yeah, you're an Army retiree as well. So thanks for your service. And yeah, so get a journalism degree if you want to go to law school. Yeah, I was just really disappointed with law school, the way they taught us. And I think that's why a lot of people stumble and have a hard time when they get out of law school, and if they pass the bar trying to start a job, they really haven't given you any on the job type of training at all. I did a lot of internships and clerkships to get that kind of training because I saw how all this academia focus is just not going to get you prepared adequately. Kathy Barella is asking, is it me or does it appear that there's an uptick in the murder cases in Florida? Yeah, it does seem like there is an uptick, doesn't it? Also, the uptick seems to be wives or ex-wives involved. Wendy hopefully is going to be charged before Donna goes to trial. Yes, I've been on the Arnold's Park roller coaster as kids. I don't know if it's still around. Brisbane. Okay, sorry. Stars Like Dust says, wouldn't a fantastic public defender with experience in murder trials even be more beneficial than a white collar crime lawyer? I wonder why Rashomon was their main choice. I mean, that's who they felt comfortable with, and they don't. A lot of clients do not know what it takes to hire the right attorney, and being comfortable with your attorney, I think, is an important thing for a defendant to feel that they're going to get their fair shake, and they don't really understand all the nuances of what it takes to hire the best attorney. And if you make millions of dollars, you're not going to be able to qualify for a public defender. But so money wasn't really the object here. I think the object was for them to find somebody they felt comfortable with that has tried violent crime cases, and that's something that Rashbaum said he just a prosecutor, so they just wouldn't know any better, I would say. Yeah, I agree with Haymana. It's better when jurors don't talk, no defense corrections or appellate issues. Chantel's asking, talk about how you analyze jury and pick good candidates. Well, as I've said, it's not so much who you pick as good as removing the bad. And I don't really want to get into a long drawn out session here, but I would just say that the thing that I'm doing is number one, what I'm trying to do is build rapport of credibility with the jurors. And so what I'm doing is I'm going down and talking to as many of them as I can, talk them in a conversational way. It's the only chance you have to build rapport and trust with them. I believe that jurors always think that both the lawyers know that who the winning side really is, who's got the truth on their side, and the lawyers are trying to like muddy it up the waters and confuse them if they don't have the truth on their side. So what I try to do is always make sure that I'm accurate and credible in court, and it starts out with the jury selection. And what I do is I try to get jurors to understand the theory of the case, the things that would come out in court, and how they would view certain things that come out in court, and so you get them to understand their theory of your case of how the evidence aligns with the theory. And also, I can do things to cast doubt in the other side's witnesses as well, and how their theory doesn't make sense. You try to weave in a lot of questions to get them to like that what your side is the truth. So that's sort of the essence of what I'm doing in jury selection. And then of course, based on certain people I have a bad vibe on, a lot of it's just instinctual gut reactions on what I think somebody is like. And I've also learned also that certain backgrounds of people I absolutely do not want them on the jury. So certain people that, and I'm not going to say that now because I don't want to help the defense at all. But certain people I would say I would never ever have on a jury, and I've seen that from personal experience that I've heard horror stories on. It's not happened to me, but certain types of people and their backgrounds or their jobs you don't want to have on a jury if you're a defense counsel. So I don't I don't want to say that now because I don't want to help anything for the defense. Yeah, Margaret, that's a good question. Our prison visits private or would a visit to Charlie be observed? They're all observed. You're not going to be able to be alone with the client normally. And even if you are in a smaller room, some states allow that where they're in smaller rooms, they're going to be on camera and stuff like that. So it's never truly alone. There's always going to be eyes on you. Brenda Redmond saying if Wendy would have found Dan, they could have had her eliminated very soon. No gunshot residue, et cetera. Take the initial heat off the family. Yeah, I mean that could be one of the reasons why. It's just so it is such a bizarre factor to have her drive down that road, no matter what she was ultimately going to do. The timing of it was just so critical to show that she had been a part of it. Maya's asking someday when all Adelson appeal are exhausted, I might want to share with you a take of what would have been. Yeah, I don't know if we'll. It may be we may be on on other cases at that point. I don't know, but we just need to see more trials here come up so we can start covering those with more Adelsons. Okay, Bama Lana saying perjury related to a capital felony, no statute of limitations. Yeah, if that's what it is in Florida, other states perhaps that is as well. I can't remember if that was in Florida or not. I did know it was significantly extended, and I didn't think it was the life of the person where there's no statute of limitations. I'm not recalling that. Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. Kelly Siegler, Cold Justice. Yeah, Kelly I thought was very good. And Sioux City Sue, I think you're from Iowa, maybe. That show is called Justice of the Laureate. Eric's Kelly Siegler. Kelly Siegler, I know is the one I was thinking of. Yeah, she's the one that helped solve cold cases by going in as a Texas attorney, not licensed in these other states, and just going over the evidence and sort of talking like an investigator about, hey, try doing this and that. Audrey Jordan is asking, why do you think Wendy played the grieving widow the day of arrest? It was so over the top. She was the ex-wife. Yeah, I mean, you hear about how much she could not stand Dan Markel, and then she turns on the tears, and then she's covering her eyes when she's doing it, and then other times she's laughing in there. I mean, the last thing you'd be doing is really laughing as much as she was laughing and carrying on. So I thought it was really a bad acting job. Okay, clueless beekeeping. Do you think that Wendy will try to flee to another country? I I can see that happening, but I don't think she will because I think she's always been protected so much. I think that's too much of a hard reality for her to grasp. But gee, I may have to be on the run the rest of my life to try and evade the fate of my other family members. Okay, Brenda Raymond says that they need evidence to charge Wendy, and I just don't think they have it. It's been 10 years. Well, I would say that first of all, you don't know all the information that they have. Second of all, the information we do have is more than enough to convict. And third of all, the time factor is zero, has zero reliability and credibility with regard to why they're not going forward. Okay, so politics is the thing that kept this thing from moving forward. Then the 10 years is meaningless. The 10 years also has been shown to be irrelevant because of the fact that Charlie was convicted after what, 9 years? So all the people were saying the same thing about all the Adelsons. So as we know, the evidence against Charlie was overwhelmingly guilty. And what about Donna? You're saying there wasn't a strong enough case against Donna because they were waiting 10 years? It'll be past 10 years of the murder before Donna goes to trial. And so what does that tell you about the weakness of the evidence? You know, that's what defense tries to say. There's been no change of evidence all these years and the state hasn't gone forward. And they try arguing that in motions and stuff like that, even in front of the jurors. But of course, the jury's not hearing the part of what stuff was done behind the scenes and who was dropping the ball and who was doing what to help the Adelsons not get prosecuted. So that's just not something that I support at all. And like I say, Brenda, if you just look at some of the other evidence, we're going to bring more evidence out in different slide decks here in the near future. Debbie's Janikowski saying it blows my mind about all the 7 involved. Not one of them said, "No way can we do such a horrific thing." How? I mean, the only one that had reservations about it was Luis Rivera. He's saying, "Let's just rob the lady. Why we got to do a killing? Let's just rob her. She's got the money. We can rob her. What she can do? Call the police?" And then we say, "Well, we robbed her instead of killing her ex-husband." So it'd have been the perfect way to get the money and not have to do the time for murder. And that's supposedly what happened the first time, the summer before, where $50,000 they got ripped off by hiring some hitmen that took the money and ran. Somebody's saying no sound at 11:13. Okay, I got to catch up to questions here. All right, so let's see. Let's see. The Patricia, could Georgia Kappelman possibly prosecute the Adelsons? Well, she's already prosecuted Charlie, got a conviction. She's prosecuting Donna. She'll get a conviction. And, they need to go after the other 50% of the Adelsons. All right, so Rob McBroom looked up the Crystal Rogers timeline. Glenda K, have you already listed Wendy's possible Freudian slip during the interview when she kept on referring to Mosaic Cafe as Monroe, the name of the road that Heaven's Hotel was on? Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I've not included that on the list yet. All right, so let's see here. We got Karen McDivitt. I like this comment here. How could Wendy not watch anything, listen to anything, not talk to her family if she wasn't part of the murder? I mean, yeah, that's so telling right there. What lawyer says you cannot listen to anything about the case, have nothing to follow up, don't answer questions, say you have to basically hide in a bunker, including your boys, and not talk about the case to anybody, tell them to talk to my lawyer and act all paranoid like that for 10 years. I mean, that doesn't happen for innocent people. All right, so let's see. Patricia Burns says the Crystal Rogers case, another one involves the whole family, the Hawks. Yeah, I remember the Hawks. That was her. I believe it was her boyfriend, and they had a child together. She was a mother of 5. Clues Beekeeping's asking if I heard anything about Donna. I heard Donna's is sort of being laying low right now. She doesn't have a lot of contact with Roshbaum. I think she does have a couple times a week visit with Alex Morris there, the local attorney. And I haven't seen much on what the contact is with Harvey, how much they're talking on that. David Lambert, what's the biggest smoking gun against Wendy? It's her driving to the crime scene a little over an hour after the murder of Dan Markel, her ex-husband. And guess what? Her kids spent the night there before, and she had not confirmed that the kids had left for the daycare. That's what she testified anyway in court. I know there's some issue about, well, did she see a text that did Dan Markel sent her a text saying just drop off the boys or something like that. In any event, that's what she testified to in court, that she didn't know that they made to school. And even if the text happened where she said that they had gotten to school, you'd still be alarmed, wanting to know what's going on, who, to see if that the boy's father was murdered or injured or something. I mean, you have all those squad cars around there. So I call that 1A and 1B. The fact that she drove there so close to the time of the murder and that she didn't do anything to follow up and check on the boys, that's 1A, 1B. So it's that to me, it's pretty much game over at that point. And then you have all these other indicators, the way Jeff Lacasse was set up and framed for 9 months, and the same thing for Katie McBanois since October of the year before. He was set up. She was set up by Charlie. There's no way Charlie would date her unless he was looking for somebody that had connections to violent people. Just me says there's no coincidence in murder. Yeah, that's not a coincidence. I agree with that. Oh, thanks, Margie. All right, let's see. I gotta catch up. Sharon Joy is asking if I'm in contact with Georgia to give her some ideas. No, I am not. So I'm not trying to step on their toes. I think their office probably knows about different podcasts, stuff like that. I think they're keeping track on stuff like this as well. So I think that the defense is looking at this more than the prosecution, but I think this known that we're out here, a lot of these channels now talking about going after more Adelsons. I think that helps keep them motivated to make sure they're doing the right thing because this case is not going to go away. Wild Irish Rose is saying she thinks that the Adelsons were protected politically for years. That's what I've been saying. But that politics is wearing thin, and they're taking them out one by one now. Albert's asking, wonder what the topic of conversation was during Wendy's last minute lunch date on 18 July of 2014. Yeah, when she met her friends, yeah, that'd be interesting. We've not seen what they have said if they've been interviewed, but yeah, that'd be interesting to see how she acted and how the whole lunch thing went down before Detective Isom showed up. Linda Mon is asking, could Wendy and Donna be in the same prison or Charlie and Harvey? No, they would keep them separate. They're not going to keep them the same there. Pamela Soucy's asking if I know what the new technology that's become available or why they needed to pick up the phones and tablets back. I wonder if they can bust open WhatsApp. Yeah, I hope they do get the WhatsApp. That'd be very telling. And so I didn't know they needed to pick up the phones and the tablets back yet. So I don't know the details of that, but hopefully they got what they needed. No, Karen McDivitt. No, John, he's not a lawyer. He's a pilot, 747 captain, international. That's why he goes to Australia a lot, among other countries around the world. Patricia Burns is asking me what I think of Bowles in the Rust trial. You feel he's confrontational, verging on aggressive. I don't know who you're talking about there. I've not followed the trial at all. I know that has to do with Alec Baldwin shooting and killing somebody on a movie set. So do not know anything more than that. And I do know there's a trial going on, but I'm not following it. Sorry. Lovely Spinks says, I really want to learn about the Constitution, human rights, and how to take cases to court on my own. Where do you learn about the statutes and how do you understand all? Well, I think that if you're trying to be a lawyer on your own, I think that's really you're asking for to take on more than you can handle. I think you really need to work with an attorney. I think being an apprentice is really the best way to learn how to do something. So, yeah, I mean, you can Google any kind of statutes now. I mean, when I went to law school, they didn't have Google. So we had legal research, Westlaw legal research, and that was a new cutting edge thing at the time where you could search cases and all that kind of stuff and do word searches. And I mean, it was really phenomenal to have. But the rest of the internet, we didn't use. There was no Google at the time or anything like that. So I graduated in 1990. So now you got the world at your fingertips there. You can read about the Constitution, anything like that. You can just Google the stuff to find out about it. And like I say, you can go to YouTube and find stuff as well. Rocky Rabbit would ask, would I ever keep an engineer when picking your jury panel? It depends on which side I'm on. So that's all I'm going to say for now. For the reasons I talked about earlier, I don't want to tip off the defense on what I think the engineer is good or bad. Okay, so Artful Living is saying, yeah, that's what I've always believed that she was supposed to find him. Yeah, that's interesting. More and more people are talking about that. I notice over time. Bugs Bunny Brunder is saying if Wendy and Harvey are arrested together, could Wendy still be called to testify for the prosecution? Well, if they have separate trials and her trial goes after Harvey's, I think definitely she would be called to testify. If they have a joint trial, then she would not because there's that privilege against self-incrimination. But she'd probably take the stand in her own defense as well as Harvey. All right, you're in Utah. No, I'm in Iowa, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, and Texas as my states of licensure. A. Miller is asking about the Innocence Project's taking on a case where they can free a high-profile convicted person and then share all the media deals afterwards. So basically, that's how they fund themselves, taking on media rights. Do you think they'll do Charlie's case? No, because he's not going to have a winnable case on appeal. There's no Innocence Project I see ever taking his case, or any of the Adelson's case for that matter. Maya saying, I believe Wendy just couldn't help herself and drove there to see what was going on. I'm sure Donna flipped out when she heard about it. And that might have been when Wendy stopped talking to her. Yeah, I mean, she probably got, how could you be so crazy as to go down that street right after? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking happened most likely. But you know what? There's a part of me is also thinking, why was she dressed that way? Everything was so thought out with this family. There was nothing by an accident, I don't think, on one hand, but the other hand, it's the way Charlie was kept talking about her driving down there, the odds, and the way he kept going over and over that, the way it really bugged him, it made me think that was something he was not expecting. Because if he knew about it, I don't think he would have been beating her up so hard about it and just going over and over in his head, like, how could you do that kind of thing? Almost the way he's saying it. Yeah, Miriam's saying, and Charlie never said, but I'm innocent. I'm innocent. Right. And just by the way he dropped his head on the table like that, that's not what a guilty excuse me, that's not what an innocent person does when they find out that they've been found guilty. Another Perth, Western Australia. Okay. All right. So let's see. We got somebody from the Middle East. All right. All right. Im Imbor. I'm sorry, I'm not saying your name right. Ibmore is saying, are Weinstein still helping Wendy and Harvey possibly? I think they probably would have distanced themselves at this point now. That's what I've seen normally in politics is like once the going gets really tough and you're talking about arrests, a lot of people go run for the hills. They don't have anything to do with them. So I'd be surprised if they were. But it worked for a number of years if they did help them out. Ginger Snaps is asking, do you think they're doing one at a time because of workload? No, I think it actually makes it more work to do them in a daisy chain fashion like this. All right, so let's see. Patricia S. is saying what I meant was, could Georgia possibly prosecute, or would another prosecutor take it on? I think George is going to be the one taking these Adelsons on. I don't think anybody else is going to be lead counsel. I think Sarah could be lead counsel, but I don't think Georgia wants to give it up. JC is saying, Wendy being a lawyer, I cannot believe she thought they would get away with this. It was such a terrible plan all the way around. I mean, yeah, they all had advanced degrees. They all have all that academic success. But when it comes to like common sense and how the criminal arena works, they were absolutely complete neophytes that had no clue what they're up against. David Lambert saying, how can anyone have faith in our justice system in this current state of corruption? Well, yeah, I think, I think I'll say this. I think we got the best legal system in place. The application of law, though, is subject to humans acting in their proper roles. And if you don't have humans acting in their proper roles, then you do have the system gets turned sideways and on its head. And I think that's how you have failure of trust and confidence in the justice system. So I think the laws are the greatest, but if you don't have, honorable people handling the laws, then you have chaos ensues. Sunshine Girlie said on the stand last time, Wendy almost said hitman instead of repairman. Did you catch that? Yeah, that's something that other people had talked about. I did see that as well. So yeah, that's a little slip up she had there. So that's another indicator. There's John. Hello, John. Oh no, you're watching on a big screen. All right, let's see here. Okay, Audrey Jordan saying both Rashma and Wendy slipped up and used the word hitman instead of repairman. Yeah, I think I can't remember if it was both of them or just Wendy. That's interesting. Carolyn's asking what legal advice do lawyers provide for a suspect that hasn't been charged yet, i.e., in the case of Wendy's lawyer who's been on the scene for a long time. Well, there's a lot of stuff that she's been consulting with her lawyer, this John Lauro, for many years. I mean, her attorney fees are probably a couple $100,000, and she hasn't even gone to trial yet. And so I think the number one thing an attorney is going to advise somebody is do not talk about the case to anybody. I think that's normal, but normally it's not family. And I think in this case, because family is part of the murder, I can see a lawyer saying, don't talk to family about that. But I think telling somebody like, don't ever see anything on the media and just sort of have this hunker down mentality. Don't try to help solve the case or talk to the police. I think that's more of something you do when you're worried about your client having, evidence against them and being a prime murder suspect. So I think that, this whole thing about immunity, him going there and watching her testify and all that kind of stuff, I think it's something that, he's trying to do damage control, but it keeps getting worse and worse for Wendy. And even this high priced lawyer can't keep her from coming across as a absolute atrocious witness in court. And it's helping encourage and embolden the prosecution to go after her as well at some point for murder. Glenda Case says, I think the reason Wendi Adelson was so distraught in June per Jeff was because the hitman called it off. Yeah, maybe that could be the case. That's something I have not heard before, but I think that's something worth further reflection. Yeah, Andrew's asking if I think Charlie's being moved to harsher conditions to make him talk about Donna's involvement. It could be a motivation thing. He's just not going to talk about his mom, though. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think he'd rather be stabbed to death in prison than talk about his mom's involvement. Norla's Fine's asking, was this case Rosie set up to fizzle out after the first three arrests? I think so. I mean, I think they had the PR machines working hard. I think they had the political ties working hard, and I think that they're banking on the fact that only the low level hitmen would have been busted, and that they would never have anybody that would dare take on the Adelsons. So little did they know that they set up the wrong guy in Jeff Lacasse, and that he had all that digital evidence as well. Mamo683 is asking, can jail calls be admissible as evidence in Donna's upcoming trial, or if Wendy's ever indicted, so many incriminating things are said? Yeah, there's things that they could bring up there. I think most of it you don't really need per se. A lot of it is Charlie's admissions and his post conspiracy talk. So I don't know if that necessarily would be relevant, but if they want to call Charlie as a witness, I think all that stuff would be fair game and cross examination by the state's attorneys. So JC said it's so interesting that one of the cops in the squad cars blocking the street would recognize Wendy's vehicle. They collect this kind of information that fast. Yeah, they did. They had like an APB put out for a vehicle, and I can't remember who they got that information from, but yeah, that was something they did correct, and I think it was very vital. Robin McBroom saying, my best friend lives in upstate New York. I called her frantically to make sure she and her family were safe on 9/11. It's a natural response to worry about anyone you do that. Yeah. I mean, even if you didn't like your ex husband, it's the father of your children. And yeah, you'd want to find out if anything's going on there. You just even normal curiosity. You see all the squad cars, the place used to live. Anybody'd get out of the car or roll the window down and say, hey, what's going on? Carol Mitchell's asking, how would Wendy care for her aging father without mentioning Donna, Charlie, or the murder? Yeah, I mean, it's really bizarre. I think everybody has to walk around eggshells when Wendy's around there because she has all these restrictions. Thanks for the mods also, by the way, tonight. I don't thank them enough. Roxanne and Private Eye Posse, thank you. Jim Parsons asking, why haven't Katie and Sigfredo said anything to incriminate Wendy or Donna? Yeah, there's something going on there that's doesn't meet the common sense smell test. I'm not sure what that is, but there's something else going on. Maybe there's some kind of backdoor deal or something that was originally promised or something. I don't know. This is it's just sort of odd the way she's has been sort of like pulling teeth. JC's asking, could Rob Adelson refuse to testify in his mother's or Wendy's trial? I don't see him doing that. And if he wanted to, if he's subpoenaed, they could probably enforce that. But you're not going to have to force it. You don't want to bring it down a reluctant witness, so that's not gonna happen. He would do the right thing, even as as hard as that would be to have to do that. If you're told, hey, we need you down here to help solve a murder case, we need you as a key state's witness. then he's going to step up and do the right thing. Audrey Jordan's asking if there's any footage of Charlie's arrest. We have not seen that. And I don't know if that's because the FBI is the one that was in charge of his arrest, and so that's why they didn't release it. The FBI getting stuff released from them is like really hard to gather. All right, so let's see. Sharon Collins is asking, I wondered how the police found Wendy so quickly at the restaurant after the shooting. Apparently, they had some kind of ability to call the phone company and find out where she was at. I'm not sure for that. That's what I was told by Judy, a legal focus podcast. Okay, excuse me. Patricia is saying, I'm sorry to keep asking, but I've heard Kaplan will not be prosecuting any further Adelsons because she's moved to another county. Is that true? She was not present for Donna's appearances. I just think because she probably had other cases she's working on, it's not a key thing for her to go to. I don't think I think that's why she wasn't there. I've not heard about her being transferred to another county. I heard that was going to happen a couple years ago, but then it didn't happen. So I don't think so. If she's transferred, I mean, she's got a house there in Tallahassee and stuff like that. She'd have to move, and she's got kids in school. So I just don't see that happening. So don't know if that's the case or not. That's the first I've heard of that being a recent issue. All right, let's see here. It's about 2 hour mark, so I'm about ready to sign off here. Yeah, I'm not sure about Nosy Bodies asking about Wendy's phone records. I'm not sure what they had for Wendy's phone records other than what we've heard about so far, but hopefully they get the WhatsApp stuff as well. Andy School's asking about, are there any YouTube videos that shows Charlie's jury selections besides mentor lawyers? I'm not tracking that, so sorry, I can't help you there. I started doing the second day. Was that the second day? No, opening statements. I covered on Survivor. Then after that, John hooked me up with Ben, and then I started doing the daily coverage while John was down there. All right, let's see here. So, Anna, still, I've talked about how I'm covering. If you go back the last a couple shows ago, I talked about how the Bridigan case. Jared Bridigan was murdered there in Jacksonville. It was a murder for hire kind of setup, and it happened 2 years before his ex-wife was arrested along with her husband, and also the hitman that did the actual shooting. So I talked about that one, how there's a lot of similarities with that one in this case. So I'm also going to talk about some others down the road. I just don't know how much of my time I'm going to commit to this yet. So that's something I've been talking with John and Ben about. A Plateau is asking, do prosecutors have any Syrian where the prisoners go to prison? Can they make any recommendation or talk to the warden in certain prisons to send them there? I think if there's certain issues about cooperation or they need them available for something, they can put in a request. But the prison warden and the Department of Corrections director and stuff like that, they're going to have their ultimate own say over it. Unless you get some kind of subpoena from the judge, they might have some kind of some kind of a cooperation agreement, or once in a while they'll do certain things. But I think for the large part, what I've seen is that the prisons systems want to have their own administrators run it and not have other people telling them how to run it for them and where to place people. Yeah, Andy Logan. Sorry you just joined here yet. I've not seen the Michelle Trachonius verdict. I don't even remember what she's charged with other than some kind of murder. Was that a murder of her child or something? I can't remember. All right, so I think let's see. Yeah, Saturday afternoon here in Sydney. Okay, so yeah, it's a little late for the East Coast folks. I'm sure a lot of them have signed off, but like I say, I wanted to start this late on a Friday night. This is a tribute to all the folks in Australia that are supporting the Justice for our kills, and I want to do the same thing for those that are following it from Europe. The UK has a big following as well for supporting Justice for our kills. Lovely Spinks is saying, "Do I think Scott Peterson has a winnable case?" I'm not familiar enough with that. I understand there were some other guys that were the issues supposedly that it did not get brought out of trial. There's some other guys that were burglarizing a house nearby, and maybe the Scott Peterson's wife at the time, I forget her name off the top of my head, but I think the thing I mean, that should have been brought out, and the defense should have known about it if that was not disclosed. But I think the thing that really gets me is that they found the body at the same lake he went fishing, and the way he acted so suspicious and all that kind of stuff. I mean, he really acted guilty for an innocent person. The way he acted and conducted himself, and remember the stuff he was telling his girlfriend at the time that his wife had died, and yet they're still looking for the body and stuff like that. I mean, it was just so many indicators of guilt there. But if there was something that really would have made a juror question, it could have changed the outcome of the case, then it's possible a case like that could be set aside on appeal. So just don't know enough about what the issues are about on appeal and where they're at on it. I'm not really following. I've seen a few things in the news, but all right. So let's see. I'm gonna go for one last question here. League Guerra's asking, do I think Wendy purposely tried to anger Dan with her actions so that his fighting back would enrage her family, cause them to take actions for her? I mean, I think it's very calculating the way she was able to kept on putting gas in the fire, knowing that her mom was just going to continually ratchet up and just be completely incensed with anything having to do with Dan Markel. So I do think that that was she doing stuff to anger him as well, to tick him off, like with regard to visitation of the boys, and he was supposed to have first rights of access to the boys when she could not see him, and what was she doing having other people get first access? So even friends and stuff like that. So yeah, that could be the case as well. So that's a good point. So go ahead and on that good point as well. Thanks again for my mods. Thanks for John's and Ben's support as well. And with that, I do plan on being back here tomorrow night, normal time, 7 o'clock. I'm going to briefly talk about the issue about the appeal that was filed by the counsel for Katie McBanois.
And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here, and have a good night and have a great weekend. Thanks for supporting the Justice Cause for the Markel. And hopefully you can join us again on Sunday evening for us here in Central Time Zone, East Coast. So have a good night.